welcome to our expert panel. My name is Sina. I'm a UX researcher at Condens. And if you haven't heard of Condens, Condens is a research analysis and repository tool and helps you to analyze, store, and share research. I'm here with my colleague, Alex. Just waved. And we host today's expert panel about research leadership. For our tool, we conduct a lot of research ourselves. And many researchers we speak with find themselves in growing research teams and describe growing research capacities. And with growing research teams, also research leadership becomes a central topic. And this is why we want to talk about this today. Also, like another perspective on research leadership is as we as research have the most comprehensive picture of the user and find ourselves in companies who are user-centered or want to work towards a user centricity. Also, there's the question how research can lead other disciplines as well. So in this talk today, we want to look at the different facets of research leadership, and we also want to give you the opportunity to ask your questions to 3 research leaders themselves. So we have 3 wonderful guests here today. We have Anna. Hi. Anna is a user experience research leader and manager. Hi. Yeah, you can already turn on your microphone if you want. Say hi yourself.
Hi, everyone. Very nice to meet you all. Should I just do a little intro? Is that what we're doing?
You can do your intro yourself, or I would just have said a few more words, but you can do it yourself. That's also fine.
We should have rehearsed, I guess. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna. I'm a user research manager at Meta, formerly Facebook. Before that, I've spent about 5 years building research teams from the ground up at smaller startup companies. And before that, I've got my start and spent about 10 years of my career as a user researcher at Google. And I'm joining from Brooklyn, New York.
Nice to have you here, Anna. Also, when I prepared for our talk today, I found that you also coordinate monthly events in New York for women working in the UX field, which I found super interesting. I want to add here. And also, I found an interesting quote. A former colleague of you wrote about you on LinkedIn. And he goes, Anna is one of those leaders that can not only talk the talk, but walk the walk as a research leader. So great to have you here, Anna. And hi, Clara. Clara is a UX research leader at eBay and currently managing 9 people in a close to 30 people research team, including research managers as well. You want to do a little intro yourself, Clara?
Yeah, sure. Happy to be here. I had a somewhat similar path to Anna. Before joining eBay, I spent 4 years building from the ground up a research team, everything from the tools processes to establishing career paths for people. And then before that, I took on many different hats working in UX and product roles. But my background is actually in translation and interpretation and in pedagogy. So really early on in my college years, I spent some time working as a conference interpreter and working with disabled youth. So I feel like even though it might not, look like a complete direct translation into what I do today, I feel like I actually took quite a few of those lessons with me throughout. I was involved quite a bit with IXDA San Francisco. I'm based in the Bay Area, but I come from Slovenia. So in IXDA San Francisco, I kind of found my space helping, organize some events and whatnot. But lately I've been mostly focused on mentoring people who are either getting into research or kind of getting into more of the lead positions in their different companies.
Great.
That's it
Thank
about
you.
me.
Good to have you here. And hi, John. We have John with us today as well. Yes. John is the principal UX researcher, also with a lot of experience in conducting research sessions in the enterprise and consumer space. And do you want to do your intro yourself, John?
Sure, yes. I'm an electronics engineer who became a UX researcher. and I have a PhD in machine learning. And I became a UX researcher after I have failed my company as a CTO, and decided to help others not make the mistake of building the wrong thing at the wrong time for the wrong people. So I'm trying to help people build the right things for the right reasons before they can actually improve them further. So the most important thing I'm concerned with is helping build what is needed. Something has utility. My experience is mostly startups and big enterprises, nothing in the middle. So whatever I say, you get a thing of that, these two areas, but nothing in the middle. And I'm an independent consultant for Zanshin Labs. I'm probably the only one here who's not a manager. So that's going to be interesting.
Great to have you here, John. And you may have heard Speak John at some other UX research events already, probably around something that has to do with UX measurement.
Yes.
I guess. So great to have you all here. So for our panel today, we've prepared some questions to get into the discussion around research leadership. And if you have any questions, follow-up questions or new questions, please ask them in the chat. My colleague Alex will bring them into the discussion as well. So we want to speak about research leaderships and also about the role of the research leaders. So I have a first question. What for you, from your point of view, defines a UX research leader? What does it take to become a great UX research leader? Maybe Anna, do you want to take this question?
All right. Well, I think I'm going to draw on the experience of those that I myself admire and who I've seen lead really well as user research leaders. I think there are a couple of things. I think I've heard people say that one of the amazing things about becoming, a very successful leader is eventually becoming obsolete. I really identify with that a lot. I think, what I also aspire to is to build out and develop and create a team that is so strong and so well positioned that eventually it's no longer, like my role might not be as necessary, right? So I definitely think that that's one of the aspects of being a great research leader. But also I think it's also about being an advocate for user research. I think that's a really, important part of being a user researcher at any level, and especially as a leader. So setting your team up for success, creating the conditions for your team to succeed, and setting up the overall discipline of research in such a way that it's not just kind of in this role of ticket taker where people come with requests, but rather the research is able to lead the development and the strategy of the product at the company. So I think those are the things that, to my mind, are the qualities that I aspire for.
Thank you. Do you want to add something, Clara?
I really like what Anna said. I think there's one of the great leaders I had a chance to work with earlier on in my career was telling me how his goal is to put himself out of a job, and I loved that quote. And actually that's something that I've also aspired to really make sure that my team has what they need as they grow, that they feel empowered, that they have the tools, that they're enabled to do the great research, and that they have the advocacy behind them in order to have their forum, have their seat at the table. I think it does, to become a great research leader, you should be a great researcher, not to say that you need to know every single thing about research, but having a really solid understanding of what it takes to build a great research program, what it takes to do great research is very important. I think that's that's kind of the baseline for how you then can even educate stakeholders, how you can advocate for the team, how you can set people up for success. I think there's probably more to talking about being a great research leader. Probably John will have more to say about leadership when you're when you're not a manager, that I think is a really unique space to be in, where you do have to have that thought leadership. You do have to have that expertise as well. It's kind of on you to, drive the impact forward through research. So a lot of things, I'm sure we'll touch more on it, but I think it is important to me, like the baseline is really understanding what research is about, and having walked the walk, like we heard before, I think is important. Not to say you're an expert in everything, but really having that context, that understanding, that solid basis is important.
That's a very good point. Jerry Weinberg, back in the 70s or 80s, I think, said that leadership is the process of enabling people to become empowered to achieve whatever they are set to achieve. So in UX research, the raison-d'etre of a leader is to empower people to actually be able to conduct and, together with their colleagues, respond to research, the designers, for example. So to me, that's the role of the leader in UX research. How do you do that? First of all, as Clara said, you gotta be a good researcher, because you need to show, not tell. The other way I have found that you can enable people is to prepare them for the research to be able to withstand scrutiny. Because every time you introduce UX research into an organization, depending on the maturity, of course, what you have in your hands is a transformation project where you move from state A to state B. And that transformation is painful, typically. So a lot of people, it's natural, it's expected to have resentment to what you're trying to do and to try to discredit your work of UX research, because you bring evidence, and evidence hurts opinions. So one of the things I always try to do when I lead teams is to help them have research that can withstand scrutiny by anyone, so that you can seal the team to be able to actually go forward. Of course, that's only one of the points, but that's a very important one I look for.
Yeah, nice. And John, we had like a call before, and this was about like leading from different levels. So leading from the top, from the middle, or from the bottom. How does that work in research? Can you explain what you meant by that?
Sure, yeah. In my experience, I have never been placed at the top to lead. I always, typically, the level I get embedded as a consultant is in the middle. Typically lead a team of a few people, 5, 6, that's the number. And in there, it's very painful because you have pressure from all over the place. The only way to be able to move forward and enable people to do what they have to do is to have a patron high up that wants research to happen. Why? Because because of a crisis or some other reason, they have realized that they need to be making research based on evidence. Need to be making decisions based on evidence that comes from research. If you don't have that environment, you will fail, especially if you're in the middle. So one of the techniques is to always choose my manager really properly, because otherwise you're set to fail. Once you're in there, you have to show, not tell, as Clara said, and do exactly what I said, insulate the team from whoever wants to basically tarnish what you're doing, and prepare them for, I know I sound negative, prepare them for people to challenge them a lot, because they're not used to the evidence driving decision-making. But that's what we want to do, because otherwise we're taking bets, and it's pointless. So we want to be making informed decisions based on evidence, which is what the researchers, whether they're in a team or embedded in different teams, bring to the organization. That's our job, is to bring evidence by which people can make decisions.
Right. We'll come definitely to that in a few minutes. One more thing, you already mentioned like that it's important for research leaders to have a background in research, or actually a good understanding of what user research really means. So coming from hands-on research to a leading research role, where you manage individual research contributors. What was the biggest change for you, Anna?
I think that's a really big shift. I think, I've seen people go through that shift. I've gone through that shift. And now that I manage managers, not even individual contributors, right? I also see my managers going through that shift to be, and I think it's a really big mind shift. It's a big change where you go from work where you produce very tangible outcomes, right? Like, you run the study, you write a report, you present that report. That report now lives in some database on a page or on a wiki, and people look at it, and you're known for having done that. To this role where you just in the background, like, you're behind the scenes almost, right? You're setting up connections, you are talking to people. You look at your schedule and you're in meetings all day, and you're like, what am I even doing? Like, what is the tangible outcome of your job? And that can be very hard to define, and also just hard to make peace with the fact that that is now what you do, and that oftentimes, the outcomes are going to be intangible, and also it takes longer, right, to realize that all the efforts you're putting in are actually working. So I think it can be a very challenging transition. I'm really grateful to all the kind of mentors and managers who were there for me when I was first shifting into a management position. But I also think, that's not necessarily the only way to grow as a user researcher. I definitely think that it's not for everyone. Give it a try as a researcher, see if it is for you, but it might not be. And that's okay. There are ways to grow and be better at your job and become a very kind of senior, accomplished individual contributor, or you can lead projects, but not people manage, right? So there are a lot of ways to grow in your career, and you have to understand kind of what gives you energy, what makes you happy, what makes you feel fulfilled versus what kind of drains you and takes away from you. And so management can be wonderful. It can be really rewarding to mentor people, to see them grow and flourish, to set them up for success. But it's also, it has, you don't have that kind of the same kind of connection to day-to-day work. So things can feel a little more remote.
And I think it's pretty great that you made also the point that this is not the direction for like the research career for everyone, and there are different ways to go and to grow. Maybe Clara, do you want to add something to like the change from coming from hands-on research to a leading research role?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was mentioned before already, right? But I think, there's certainly that shift in mindset from making, let's say, people and companies successful by contributing insights and data about the customer needs, right? To making people successful by providing tools, resources, support, coaching to do what you used to do before, right? So I think that's, it's just a little bit of a shift in mindset, but if you look at it more kind of holistically, it's still really helping people make decisions. It's just in a different context. I think also, yeah, when it comes to really starting to manage managers and manage leaders, which is also the position I'm in at the moment, I think it's important to really understand when is the time to let go and how to go about coaching, who needs what. I think it does take some time to kind of develop a little bit of an intuition and a little bit of an approach to understand what each individual might need at a particular point in time, and ensure that you are kind of taking yourself a little bit out of the equation and letting them explore potential paths to take, potential ways to do things. I think at the beginning for new managers, it can happen a lot of times that they want to help and they want to advise and say, hey, here's what I did, like try doing the same thing. And that for sure is, it's, meant in the best way possible, but it doesn't allow people to necessarily explore and grow in their own way and maybe, think of a different solution that you yourself haven't thought about before. So I think it is like, to me, it's been a really rewarding shift. I love it. I really appreciate being on this path and being given these opportunities. But I think it's important to also recognize, like Anna was saying, it should be more, in my mind, it's all sort of like more like a trellis. I remember reading about it in org design for design orgs, if people have read the book, where, you know, at some point, some individuals might decide to take a manager path, and that they might decide that's not for them. And like Anna was saying, it's a good thing to try out and see if it works for you. And I think it's important to have that support to be able to pivot if needed as well.
Let's see, we have an extra bonus panelist here.
This is pandemic working from home. That's children, package delivery, everything, of course.
Everyone is welcome here. So
I just wanted to say that I really agree with what Clara said. Like, it's really very well said. I couldn't I agree with everything you've just mentioned. And I think the letting go is a crucial part of becoming a good leader and a good manager. And it can be very difficult. I think what we also talked about is that it's important to have been a researcher for a good time and have a good understanding, but that can also make it harder to let go because you're knowledgeable and you're more senior and you've done it for many years. And it can be hard to see somebody struggle and not step in and let them learn instead of just coming in and being like, all right, you know, here's how to do this, right? But you can't do that because then you don't give people autonomy.
So I think we already got some questions in the chat. Maybe we can ask some of the questions. Alex, do you want to take over?
Yes, we got a lot of questions. That's great. I want to start with one from Sarah, which I'll read out. So she says, it can be stressful for an early career researcher to feel like having to defend the work. Do you have any recommendations so that it's less defensive and more positive for the researchers and for that experience? Any anecdotes or tips that you have? Whoever feels that's a question for them, please go ahead.
Well, why be defensive is my initial question.
Sorry, just one more thing to add is I think this relates to something that was mentioned earlier, that you have to sort of defend your work or sort of protect the work that you're doing. So I think this is where the question comes from.
Okay, so yeah, our job is to bring evidence and clean evidence, may I say. So there's nothing to be defensive about. We give the evidence and we are unapologetic about bringing the evidence. The question is what happens when your evidence gets challenged. That's the part where you must make sure that the evidence can withstand scrutiny by anyone. So being prepared is the answer, and being unapologetic is the answer. And expecting people to not understand, therefore you have to educate and educate and educate and try again. And sometimes, you know, you have to let go, but you need to keep trying. But defensive is, I know I'm not criticized, but defensive is probably the wrong term. Unapologetic, you know, just we found this information, you have to make a decision based on this. Please go forth, but this is what we found. Yeah, and over communication, I have found this is better than anything else, and bringing in people. So bring in people before they ask questions and let them learn what you've just found out before you disseminate it to everyone. Whether that's a PO, an engineer, someone else, just bring them in and say, oh, look what I found. I'm going to present this, you know, next Friday. What do you think? Or what's this little video for users struggling? You know, stuff like that. It has to do with dissemination, but, you know, unapologetic is the word.
I think John is hitting on like a very important topic here, which is stakeholder buy-in. I feel that it's one of those super important things. And in fact, I think I've seen sometimes junior researchers or people who have worked at a company where that wasn't particularly research friendly, developed this attitude of like us versus them, right? Like it's kind of it's not a collaborative relationship, but more, you know, kind of there's, you know, tension. And not to say that tension is not good. Tension can be productive, lead to discussion, but I think it's not like the most productive way to kind of look at the situation, right? All the people in the room are working towards the same goal, right? Building the best product. So I think it's super important to get your stakeholders involved as early as possible, and not like just in terms of like, I'm going to have them approve my study or talk about my plans, and I'm going to go in my ivory tower, and then 2 months later, I'm going to come back with the results, right? No, make it our research, right? Make it a joint journey in search of truth. It's a quest. It's a shared quest for truth and for insight, right? Have people attend sessions, have them take notes, do debriefs after sessions, right? Like have 5-10 minutes after, or in Slack while it's happening. What are the top 3 things that you found that were interesting, or is anything surprising, right? Or have at least debrief at the end of the week, right? If you can do some kind of brainstorming or insights grouping together, anything you can do to get your stakeholders involved. I mean, my criteria for successful collaborative relationship is that by the time the report comes out, your immediate team is like, it's old news for them. They've already moved on. They're already working on implementing all of this feedback and incorporating it and moving forward. It's not a surprise. There's absolutely nothing for them to be, you know, questioning you about. You did this together, right? So I think for me, the advice is build those relationships, build those collaborations. Don't be defensive about your research. Don't position yourself as the research expert. You are the research, you're the expert in facilitating the quest for knowledge, right? But knowledge is going to be belonging to everyone. So that's my view.
Yeah, those are really good points. I think it is that unapologetic piece. It's getting your team involved as early as you are getting involved, and perhaps, you know, it depends on how, if it's a new team you're working on, or, you know, if it's a new project that is a little bit, you know, unknown. It might be a good idea to try to understand where they're coming from and what their level of understanding of research might be. That can help you kind of set the stage and maybe dispel some myths that might be kind of going around for that new group or new stakeholders. That's the only one thing I would add potentially in this particular situation.
Great. I see a lot of comments and re-quoting in the chat here, so I think this seems to resonate with the audience. Another question or set of questions that we got was, for example, I want to read the question from Melissa. She's asking what distinguishes a lead researcher from a mid-level researcher in your eyes? And then there's a related question that puts a different twist to it, sort of. If you are in a mid-career trying to decide whether you want to continue as a senior researcher or go to research manager, what would be any advice or recommendations that you have? So that's why I think those two are related, and would love to hear your answers about that.
Well, it's not for me to answer. So it's either Anna or Clara.
Maybe we start with the first one. What do you think distinguishes a research lead sort of from a mid-level researcher in your eyes?
It's a hard question. I think it, you know, at least from my experience, it depends from, like, you know, career ladder to career ladder, from manager to manager, company to company, let's say, and even, you know, how one sees themselves. So I think, you know, feels like a bit of a loaded question, because you might feel like, you know, you are doing the work of a lead in your own right, and, you know, thinking about your own career track. And I think that's the part that's really important to keep in mind, right? It's like, what does that mean to you? if you want to be a lead, what does being a lead really mean to you? Career ladders might be different. There might be some company, regulations around these things. But I think as long as you're staying true to your career path and how you're defining your next goal, your next objective, and how you want to expand in the responsibilities, your influence, the way that you're working, as long as you're staying true to that, I think you're progressing. I think to me, it's more about, I'm very much into like growth and continuous learning. So to me, it's always about like improving myself and, doing better, doing differently, learning new things that, I didn't do before. So as long as I see that there's a progress there for me, that's the important piece. But of course, let me add this. It's always important to talk to your manager directly, right? And really understand what the expectations there are. And, as long as you can align your expectations with theirs and understand where you stand on that, it's, that's what's going to help you really define that difference.
Okay, Anna, you want to add to that, or does that sound good? Okay, perfect. We have a lot more questions. Maybe we can do one more before we go back to the questions that Sina also prepared. And I found this interesting. So it's from XamTP, and the question is, what have been the worst moments in your career as a UX leader, and how did you overcome them? So it's a bit of a potentially personal anecdote sharing that we have here. But I guess this goes into the direction of what to avoid, sort of, or things that we can learn from. The question goes on and says, what and why would you do differently today, and with the knowledge that you have gathered by now?
I can answer that. When I realized that my data are not clean enough and I have to discard the data, so I have to tell everyone I screwed up. That's one part. The other one is when I basically deliver news that people don't want to digest, which, if they don't, harm the organization. And therefore, I have to be really, really, really direct about it. And basically risk, sometimes it has happened, of being fired because I challenge someone up the hierarchy based on evidence. It happens to me. And then you have to basically say, is it my job or my integrity? I know what wins every time, but it's going through it. It's not an easy, especially if you're not senior enough. Yeah, because if you're senior enough, you have a lot of confidence and you say, yeah, the hell with it. But if you're junior, that stays with you. If you take the wrong decision, it stays with you, and that's hard.
Wow, thanks for sharing. That sounds very, very intense, but thanks for sharing that. And I totally also see the trade-off here between, integrity and doing what seems to be the easy way.
I think you were muted for the.
Sorry, my bad. I was just asking, Anna Clara, do you want to add to that question? Any stories that you want to?
Share? I think, I remember myself when I was kind of more junior in my career and how I would kind of feel frustration even at the managers that I thought were amazing, because I greatly overestimated their power in changing certain things. Like if I saw something I didn't like and I talked to my manager, I was kind of expecting them to fix that, right? And for those of you who are parents and who've been parents of young children, I feel like management and leadership can be a bit like that sometimes, right? Like when everything is going well, you're not getting feedback. But when you got it wrong, that's when you get feedback, right? And that can be hard. Because you don't necessarily, nobody's gonna walking around giving you gold stars for doing your job well. Your team just kind of expects you to do well by them and to improve things. And then I think they people sometimes tend to kind of overestimate how much is under your control. And I think that can be hard. That can be hard to feel like you're not able to set, to do what you want to do for people necessarily, but, you have limited control, and you can push for change, and you can push for things to be different with processes and things like that. But it's not, it's not as straightforward. Like, I have so much more sympathy and empathy for my managers, especially when I was kind of brand new and had like great expectations for them to just go and change the culture of the entire company, because, I was struggling with something, right?
Yeah, I very much can empathize with that. I think it is about, a little bit is about there's only so much that you can control. And I think as a people leader, you really kind of strive to do the best that you can. And sometimes you feel kind of powerless, right? And how to handle situations like that is really difficult, because of course, at least for me, it's, I try to be as transparent as possible with my team and share the context of, tough prioritization calls or tough decisions that sometimes had to be made in the past, right? But there's only so much context you are allowed to or can share or even are privy to. So those can be really difficult situations. I think that's why, trust with your team needs to be established and continuously needs to be established, because of these situations that come up quite frequently for managers, I think.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and also thank you so much for asking your questions in the chat. So I think we will go on with like a few more questions from our side, and then we have time to add some more questions in the end to our discussion. So you already mentioned it a few times, like that research leadership has a lot to do with communication and building relationships beyond your research team. I would like to ask you, maybe John, you can take this question. How do you communicate the value of research in your organization?
Okay. How do you do anything in the organization? Well, one person at a time, and different people have different speeds of understanding and learning. I typically go for the ones that want to listen first and try to build the so-called oil spill effect. You have a few people here that listen and they grow their knowledge, a few people there, one person there, and as it grows, it becomes a bigger and bigger cluster. Now, in order to do that, you must be able to take the long view. It just doesn't happen from one day to the other. So you have to use tools to do that. One is, for example, seminars. The other one is chatting with someone. The third one is presenting draft research to another person, as Anna said, so that it doesn't become a surprise when the information gets out. You have to use different techniques to give morsels of the value of research to people as you move along the path to maturity, because, and it depends where you are in that path. One of the things I do is I ask questions, of course, as a researcher. And one of the questions I do ask to people that think they have the answer is, how do we know that we're not wrong? I go like, huh? How do you know that you're not wrong with this decision about adding X to the product? And if the answer is, well, I know because it's a truism or something, then you go, would you bet your salary on this backlog item, for example? And if the answer is no, you can say, let me help you. Now, one of the important questions is to say, how may I help you? But, you need to grow into doing these things. Questions do actually help.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a helpful question. Anna Clara, do you want to add something to, like, how do you communicate the value of research in the organization?
I mean, I think
Maybe it's
John captured a bunch of it, but it's you a little bit at a time. You start by winning people over, by demonstrating the value. You have to think about your research being impactful, answering the questions that your stakeholders need information on, right? And if that happens and they're now able to make their decisions with more confidence, right? That's going to pave the way for them asking for more research and becoming your advocate and becoming somebody who looks out for you and who wants you and your team to be in important discussions and to be part of workflows. So I think it's just, you have to start and you have to build these relationships from the ground up.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's, when sharing more at the leadership level, if there's some needing convincing, it's also about sharing some best practices or some wins from, let's say, other competitor companies and whatnot to show how important it is to invest in research. There's been a lot of, studies done in the past. There's a lot of also new information online that can be leveraged to really speak to how research works in organizations and how it makes them successful. So it's another potential approach to take, and continuously communicating. I think that's been a theme for us too, continuously educating here on this panel, right? Continuously educating, continuously finding allies and showing the value and showing that impact. It's, it's a marathon.
Thumbs up here. I think it's an important point to find your advocates for user research and to help get user research seen and the value communicated. So like we have a few more minutes left, I would like to go to a little bit different topic at the end of our session. You've been in roles where you been part of a growing team yourself, or actually led the team or grow the team from maybe 0 researchers, maybe 1 or 2 researchers to a successful research team with multiple researchers and research managers. Do you have any tips you want to share here, how to maybe create the environment for the research team that allows them to still learn and grow?
A lot of things. I think we talked a little bit about enablement and talked about empowerment and talked about advocacy a little bit. And I think it's, it's a mix of all those things, right? Ensuring that you have the right tools in place, ensuring that you have the support system for new people you're bringing on board, and ensuring that you continue to advocate and educate, right? And then maybe in the more people leadership position, ensuring that you provide that space and coaching to each individual and the team as a whole to really understand what where we're going, what we're going towards, ensuring we're aligned on the same goals, and driving some accountability, ensuring that we're all really contributing to those goals. I think it's also really important. I saw some questions in the chat about how do you build trust with your team, and I think that's really key. And in my the way I've seen it was really looking up to some leaders I've worked with in the past and continue to work with. I think it's really about being, being human, being authentic, being humble, not forgetting to have fun as well. It can get very serious at work, and it can get stressful sometimes being the bearer of bad news and whatnot. So I think too often, at work, we really try to bring our best selves and do our best and present ourselves in the best way, which of course is, it's great and it's important for us to be the experts in the room, but at the same time, not forgetting about our authentic selves. And, everyone makes mistakes sometimes, leaders of leaders do, and really, showing that and being a little bit vulnerable when it comes to that can really take you a long way. I think it can be really hard for researchers who need to sort of put themselves aside as they talk to customers day to day to have like some space to be themselves. And if you can, as a leader, maybe create that safe space, I think it's good that, if you can help build that camaraderie with the team, and that can help a lot with the trust and the feeling of safety. I think Anna mentioned before, the space to learn. And that means also failing sometimes and celebrating that and learning and overcoming that and doing even better next time, I think is so key. I'm sure folks have more to say, so I'll shut up now.
I think these were wonderful points. I think for me, the guiding principle has been is that it's a relationship, and it's individual relationship with each and every person on your team. And just like any relationship, it takes nurturing, it takes getting to know each other as people, but also building trust takes time. You can't skip over it. It's something that, you know, people have to see that you have their back. And in order for you to do that, you have to also understand what's important to them, what motivates them, what do they want out of their career, what do their growth looks like, you know, how to support them better, how to set them up for success. So I think it's just something that takes time, and authenticity, I also think, is really, really important. Like, if you want people to be authentic with you, you have to bring your authentic self to work as well.
Yeah, that's true. Also, it helps to screw up in front of them, because then they trust you more because you're real, you know, you're not fake. By trying, I mean, not faking the screw up, but by trying and failing and owning up to your fails. That always brings people together. One of the things, again, it's a question that I do with UX teams, departments, not necessarily just research, is I try to close the loop. And basically, how do we prove that we've done a good job so that the rest of the organization shows the love, if you like? How do we prove that? Typically, the answer is, well, we don't do that. And to which I answer, well, let's measure something and see how well we're doing, and let's measure again. And maybe we can measure some more. And with data now, we can actually go to the rest of the organization and say, look, the team is making some progress. Just allow the team to help you improve and make more progress. So closing the loop is important. And people think it's expensive, but it isn't. It's actually very cheap to do that. I find this motivating to people, because they can see, you know, they can see the line. Or if you're not improving, then you can course correct. But having this tool of measuring so that you can close the loop and prove that the UX team, I'm not saying just researchers, are contributing, I think that's important for everyone inside the organization. And you get more budget, which is always good.
Cool. Thanks so much for sharing about like building that environment to learn and grow for the team. And to grow to be a successful team. I'm just looking at the time. Maybe we can do a few more questions from the chat. Alex, do we have more questions here?
Totally. There's lots of questions. I want to address one question that was asked in the beginning. What can someone who is not in a research leadership position, maybe as in a team of one, do already today in order to prepare and think about a position in the future? Do you have any things to share about that?
I mean, you are in a leadership position, right? You're not doing people management, and that's the part that you will have to figure out once you're doing that. But you are in a leadership position, right? You are building out the discipline. You are creating the culture of research. You're getting buy-in. You're doing all of those things. So I think there's, you know, plenty that you're already doing. That's my take.
I think maybe if, you know, someone wants to be, you know, intentional about it and kind of project how the team is going to grow from, let's say, a team of one, it's, I mean, one thing that if I look back at like when I was the sole researcher and then kind of growing the team, it was really important for me to have that alignment across the organization, especially with leadership and understanding of what's the kind of, what does the runway look like? What does the year look like, or maybe 2 years ahead, so that I knew a little bit of what I can count on and what I can expect, where to be scrappy and where to be more structured, let's say, right? And where to meet people where they are in terms of tools, processes, approaches that can really help them if you're, you know, bringing someone new on board, if you have something already in place for them to get started. But I think it's like Anna was saying, you're probably doing all these things already. It's just maybe forecasting a bit, aligning with the leadership and the team, and seeing where and how you would structure it that it's going to work the best for your environment.
Don't have anything smart to say. I think time is the only resource we cannot replenish on this planet. So keep doing meaningful work. And if your work is meaningful, then you will find a way. But, you know, time you cannot replenish. So make sure you don't spend your time doing what's not meaningful. And if you find it's not meaningful, correct it. You know, and it does no harm to refactor your CV when you see you cannot do that.
Great. And then we have one more question from Greg. Greg is asking about the player-coach model. In particular, I'm sure saying that I've hired another researcher who will start soon. I'm the sole researcher at my company. Greg likes to do the work, likes to get involved into research projects, but at the same time, is growing to a lead position. So the question in particular is like, what challenges are there with that model, and what things should I be thinking about before diving into this sort of setup? Clara, you want to go first? You seem to have
I'm thinking what how to frame it. I'm just nodding because I recognize it is a balancing act when you're in a position like this, and there is definitely something to be said about how do you estimate your bandwidth in this situation. I've seen a lot of folks get super excited about, oh, I'm going to continue to do the research and I'm going to support this new person, and then, you know, it will all work out fine. I would say definitely don't underestimate the time that onboarding someone new to the organization, to the company, to the process, the ways of working, how much time that's going to take, and ensure that you're setting yourself up for success with how much research you're going to be able to do. I think it's also important to set those expectations with the leadership and, you know, whoever your manager is as well, to ensure that there's not like the same expectation of output. And maybe, you know, debate on what it means to be a player coach, how long and how sustainable it is to have this sort of position, you know.
100% what Clara said.
I see Anna nodding as well.
I agree.
Perfect.
I think it's just, you have to think about time management and making sure that if you're moving into management, you have the time to give your people to develop and grow them and understand them and guide them. It's easy to kind of, it's not easy, but those are the things that can be hard to balance if you're also doing a lot of hands-on work. So it's just a balancing act.
Makes sense. Cool. Perfect. Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, I think we can do one more question.
Okay, perfect. There was one question from Joel I want to pick up. Okay, I'm not even sure if I understand it myself, but let's give it a try. How do you all reconcile that spectrum of what I would call better than anecdotal and scientific certainty? Does the question make sense?
What's the context?
This was asked about 20 minutes ago. So it was, I think it was when we talked about talking to stakeholders, building trust, sharing the value of research in the organization. I think that was the context when this question was asked, and I shortly repeated. So how do you reconcile that spectrum of what Joel calls better than anecdotal and scientific certainty? Joel, in case you're still there, please go ahead.
Like there's no certainty ever, right? Like even makers of medical devices, their margin, they still have a margin of error, right? Like it's like 99 point something % certain, but there is still that small percentage of uncertainty. So that's like, first of all, like there's no certainty. But also it depends what you're planning to do with this data, right? Like I think, qualitative data, which is in its nature anecdotal, you're talking to, I don't know, 8, 10, 12 people, right? This is about gathering the richness of experience, understanding the lived experiences of these people, kind of giving color. And then you have the quant, right? Where you can get how many people can relate to these types of experience, how many people are having these types of problems. So I don't know if there is this like reconciliation. These things are for different purposes, but they work best together. But even if you're gonna do a very nice exhaustive quant survey, like for most, industry purposes, like you're not gonna go above like 80 or maybe 90% confidence, because you're gonna have to have huge sample sizes to get past that. And so I don't think there's ever like bulletproof insight of data.
I 100% agree here.
With you, well, okay, I will be controversial. You can investigate small number statistics, and you can encode qualitative data into quant data and use that for people that understand or receive stats easier than qual observations. If you go to the Measuring You website and you read the articles or even the academic papers by Jim Lewis and Jeff Soro, then you will find how to deal with small sample size statistics. And you don't give point estimates, you give means with confidence intervals. And then you appeal to loss aversion and you talk to people about the worst case scenario, which is one side of the distribution, and the best case scenario. And then people might listen. And it is scientific, everything in UX is measurable and you can do it. But you have to be prepared to be challenged, and you have to be really prepared, and you will be challenged. But yeah, there are ways for doing this, and I suggest you investigate small sample size statistics and inferential statistics and confidence intervals and all that stuff, and look into coding. And if that fails, then present a video with a user struggling, and that will appeal to emotion, and maybe you will win the argument. It always helps.
Great, thanks for sharing. And I hope I covered most of the questions from the chat. It was great that so many questions and apparently so much interest in that topic. I tried to cover everything, or it was picked up by one of the experts either way during the conversation. So thanks for that.
Well, thank you so much. So we are almost through here. Thanks so much for joining, everyone. We hope that you find something here to take away for either for your own practice or maybe for thinking about how to grow or your research career or which path to take. And also to maybe think about how to collaborate here with others and build relationships. Thank you, Anna, John, and Clara. It was really great to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives on research leadership or whatever that means, and all the topics that are related to that bigger topic here. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing experience. So,
actually, I learned a lot from Anna and Clara and the questions. So that was great.
Same here.
Yeah,
thank you for having me. This was great.
This was really fun. Thank you for having us. It's fantastic. And thanks everyone for being such a great involved audience. I always appreciate that.
totally.
We'll see you in Slack.
And huge thanks for Sina for doing such a wonderful job moderating.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. So have a nice day or evening or night, wherever you are around the world. And if you're joining other sessions from Advancing Research, have a great conference and hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you on Slack.
See you on Slack.